What's up everyone, Tom from the Airsoft headquarters here, and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be dedicating this video specifically to look at the Avalon series of rifle internal components and looking at exactly what is going on, what is available, what's coming in the box with them, so on and so forth. And we're giving you guys the current generation of Avalon rifles because I was taking all of my stuff apart to put a Kythera into my 416A5. That's the current build, so taking the old gearbox, or the gearbox that was in there, replacing that gearbox with an older generation one that originally had the HPA, but this gun right here. So the Avalon AEG gearbox that was in there is going into here. It's essentially just changing out some components, and which just gave me the option to show you guys what's going on here. So I know that in previous videos I did break open one of the gearboxes with the SIG MCX specifically. However, those are going to be specific components for the MCX. And so this here is going to be the current generation, or the current internals as to what's going on with this gearbox. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear the table here, and we're going to get up close and personal with some of those internals. So give me just a second. Bam! Got it all cleaned up. Everything looking good and in order. Finally. So, a little bit of back history with this rifle specifically. So this is my very first VFC rifle. It did come in the Block 1 type of configuration. This was technically the VFC, so pre-Avalon, but kind of Avalon. It was in a weird, in the middle of the road state. So got it and picked it up. And if you haven't visited the store before, we absolutely love our VFC Avalon series of rifle systems. We've had an abundance of success. Our player base has had an abundance of success with them as well. Overall, our experience as technicians with the Avalon series of rifles is that they need truly very minimal upgrades or accessories or parts overhaul in order to get them up to a performing or a competitive style of performance. So we really like them for that reason. Just out of the box, ready, good to go. Pretty much no work is needed for them whatsoever. Really the only thing that we would have on a list of things to upgrade would be that inner barrel. So for this one, I just kept it as the standard brass one. Didn't really feel like changing out for anything super crazy. But I did put this cool little washer, or not washer, but this spacer system on there that I put on there with Teflon tape. So that just allowed it to sit a little bit tighter in that outer barrel, allow for not as much movement back and forth, just to help be a little bit more precise. But upgrading to a Type 4 inner barrel, a 6.03 or a 6.02, will allow you to be a little bit more consistent. But I decided not to go with that for this one, and overall I'm still very, very happy with the performance that I got with this one. Now I did change the parts out originally on this guy for an HPA, but I'm now going back to AEG. And the AEG parts are from the 416A5, which is the current generation of Avalon internal components, which we're overhauling now. So, when we're looking at parts and components, a lot of people have this desire to completely swap everything out. And really when it comes to the Avalon series of rifle systems, we believe that that is farther from the truth. And again, these are our experiences. These are our knowledge base as technicians and as players on the sport for many, many, many years. I mean, accumulatively, between myself and the other technicians here, we've got about 25, 30 years of experience, both on Airsoft side of things and teching. So overall, we've got a collective abundance of knowledge and information. Now that being said, for me personally, I wouldn't change these internal components out. Starting with the piston, it is a standard half rack piston. Overall, the red part is going to be polymer in construction, metal front teeth. Those are going to be what the gear set picks up. So those are designed, or ideally you want your entire rack to be full metal. It is going to increase the weight minimally, but having more metal teeth will allow it to have more durability later on down the road if you wanted to install higher tension of springs. The piston head really is a little bit more basic when it comes to a performance style of piston head. Now this is miles above what a lot of the other piston head looks like with rifle systems that we also sell here at the Airsoft headquarters. So this is a expanding piston head, meaning as it travels forward, air is going to travel into the holes and help push that O-ring against the inner walls of your cylinder, which allows for a little bit better of compression. Now, in my experience, and with other technicians, there is going to be a test that I can show you to make sure that you do have a good compression when it comes to your piston cylinder head. And I'll show you that in just a minute. Your cylinder here, metal, aluminum, it is going to have a vent on the very back here. I believe this is a type A, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. But this does allow for air to come into the air chamber. What happens is as that piston passes forward, as that O-ring passes past that window, then it's going to start compressing the air volume that is in this space. And as it completes that smushing of the air into that inner barrel, it's going to travel backwards. And as it goes through that window or past that window, that allows for air to travel into the cylinder because there is going to be a slight vacuum effect, but that allows air to travel in, equaling out air pressure, and allowing more air to be compressed as that cylinder, or that piston, excuse me, comes back forward and completes another cycle. We have our cylinder head, again, a little bit more basic. I mean, there's nothing special to it. There's a little bit of a sorbo pad here on the very back, which does help with the AOE, or the angle of engagement. By no means is it perfect, but it does help push that piston back far enough to where it's not going to create any major effects or defects later on down the road, again, if you put a higher tension spring inside of here. Now, the sorbo pad also does help as a dampener for the metal head of the piston head, which does not allow it to deform again over time as you use those internal components. That's something that will need to get changed out later on, but they do make the parts included in here to just help with the longevity overall of the rifle build. Now, like I said, there is going to be a trick here to test if you have a good compression. So what you're going to do is you're going to install your cylinder head onto your cylinder, take your piston, finger over that nozzle of the cylinder head, and start to press upwards. Now what happens is as the piston goes past that window, it's starting to compress that air volume inside of the cylinder. But with your finger over the head of the cylinder head, or over the nozzle of the cylinder head, that does not allow air to escape, or at least the idea is that you don't have any air escaping. So if for some reason that piston can travel upwards, and I'm pressing as hard as I can, then you have a leak somewhere and you need to address and find it. So if I put my thumb over here, I'm going to try my best to hold that cylinder head down. There's no leak at all. So even though these are going to be more basic components, they are properly spec'd and designed for each other, which is going to help overall with consistency of air voluming going behind that BB, allowing for consistent flight path, consistent velocity, consistent joule output, so on, so forth. Overall, great components just in those first three that I mentioned, allowing for great overall performance. And then we have our AEG nozzle. It's a standard nozzle, nothing special about it. It's plastic. It does what every other nozzle is designed to do. However, again, these are coming in spec to the other components, which is going to help. Even if it's off by a mil or a half a mil, if you do pick up aftermarket nozzles, that can lead to misalignment issues down the road. Tappet plate, like every other tappet plate, plastic, designed to flex and work in conjunction with all the other internal components. While I have the pile here, anti-reversal latch, literally the same as every other anti-reversal latch. The tappet plate spring, your safety latch, all the screws here. Overall, really solid. There are some cases where I have had other brand of gearbox screws strip out on me. And by no means is that from over torquing or utilize improper tools, but the Avalons are just a nicer overall build quality. Standard VFC 18-1 gear set. These are going to be metal in construction. High strength metal, I like them a lot. One of the other things that I typically do if I feel like I need to build up some of the Avalon internals is I will properly shim the 18-1 gear set to each other. And shims just are smaller washers, very thin, that will help align the gears perfectly with each other to allow as smooth of a rotation as possible. And that just allows for faster trigger response, faster rate of fire, less overall wear and tear on those internals. These are going to be 8mm ball bearings. I say that, yeah, 8mm ball bearings. I'm gonna double check because, fun fact, you can use a BB because the BB is 6mm, and if a BB is smaller than that, then it's 8mm, and I can see here from either side, it's an 8mm. You have 8mm ball bearings inside of here, which is overall a nicer size to go, but that's getting into the weeds of it. Over on the left-hand side here, we have the gearbox that has, or the half of the gearbox that has the MOSFET system. And they went with a trigger contact integrated MOSFET unit, which is by no means a new design, but it is newer in relation to the Avalon series of gearboxes. Typically, they do tend to be on the wiring harness somewhere back here. So underneath this heat shrink typically is where the MOSFET system would sit, but this is not the MOSFET. This is the fuse. It's still early in the morning. So this is the fuse system that helps break the contacts of the wiring system. So if there is something that is occurring internally, that fuse is going to snap and not allow energy to continue to run through the wiring system, preserving those internal components for as long as possible. Again, so the fuse is over there, easy access. In here is the MOSFET system. Again, it's in line with the trigger contacts. So there's really nothing special about that other than it gets more surface area. Back here on the wiring system that would sit in the buffer tube, I know that there is some issues with people trying to fit their buffer tube screw plate in the buffer tube if the MOSFET is sitting back there. And so generally they do have to shrink the MOSFET in order to sit back here. However, if they are intending to put it in the gearbox, they can, make it a little bit bigger, have a couple more features. Maybe not features overall, because these are not inherently designed to be a programmable or optical sensory MOSFET system. While there are Avalons that come with those, this one specifically is not the optical sensitive MOSFET system. These are going to be silver base of wiring systems. I know this is all probably information that is going over people's head, but these are all components, I promise you, that do make this overall a better system. A silver wiring system that does allow for electricity to course through it at a faster and steadier rate. Overall, they went with thinner wires as well, which does make it easier with that MOSFET system to run the wires through the gearbox and not have the possibility of them getting chewed up by the teeth of the gears or by the motor. So good option there. Small silver wiring. The spring, what comes in the box, if memory serves me correctly, again, over the majority of Avalon's is going to be a M120 spring. Because I play indoors most of the time, I do generally swap this out for a M90 spring. So while the Avalon series does have a quick change spring system, which means that you can get access to the back of the gearbox very, very easily without having to disassemble everything. Unfortunately, the receivers of the Avalon series does not allow for a quick change spring system. So that is one of the downsides of the Avalon series specifically. But the MCX, the SIG MCX with the Avalon gearbox, is currently one of the only Avalons that has a true quick change spring system. And I'm doing a mental checklist, and I truly think that that is one of the only ones that has a true quick change spring system. Maybe the Gladius? Maybe the Gladius. We'll have to fact check that. But for sure, the SIG MCX, because I've got one. So we have that half and that half. Talked to that one at length. The motors here are going to be a Neo high torque motor. It is going to be a high torque, not a high speed. Certainly a better stock motor. By no means the best at all. A lot of times I will personally change these motors out as well. Even after doing a shim job, you can get it to where these are turning over at a faster rate. In conjunction with lower tension of springs, that is going to help with the turnover rate of the gearbox. However, if you do intend to utilize higher tension springs, utilizing a higher torque of motor, which would be swapping this one out for something else, those are what you're going to need to keep in mind if you are changing any of those components out. And then our quick change spring guide itself. Now this one is going to be for the 416. I still need to find the one that was originally for this one. But yeah, a ball bearing spring guide, one of the nicer ones. Albeit that I will mention, if you are someone that likes to cut your AEG springs, which I don't suggest and we don't suggest doing, but if you have to, if your piston, which this one in here looks to be fine, the cut end ideally would go into the piston itself, and the uncut end of the spring would sit against this ball bearing spring guide here. Because what happens is if you put the cut end towards the ball bearing spring guide, the cut itself will leak over into one of the creases of the ball bearing here and just create jamming and lock up the gearbox and possibly tear at some of the gear teeth. It is an extreme scenario, but I have seen it occur once. But again, that's not something that's a manufacturer defect. That was a customer that wanted to change some of the internal components without realizing how to properly do it. So this is the PSA, the educational, informational video about these components and what you should be looking out for. And that is really it. Now when it comes to this build specifically, I am going to be utilizing the Colt license receiver. Again, this is for my very first one, so it does have the Cool Guy TM01 for numero uno for VFC rifles, and then a enhanced polymer stock from PTS in order to hold my lithium ions, which not sponsored by anyone. I just really love the lithium ions. Great performing batteries, last a very long time, and I suggest you pick them up for yourself. And that is currently it. So again, to reiterate, in my opinion and in the opinion of the other technicians here, you should not need to change any of the internal components if you want a high-performing gun directly out of the box. However, with a mission-specific objective or a loadout in mind, such as if you were to play indoors or for a specific style, then you do need to make adjustments as to those internals, and be aware to balance some of the other components that are related to the one that is getting swapped out, be aware as to how to properly install those and what is going to be the most compatible. Refer to professional technicians. Always, lots of forums, lots of Facebook forums, and lots of other videos like this. So this one was a little more basic, a little bit more bare bones, but since I had this one all apart, I figured that this would allow people to see what the current generation of internal components are, and maybe get you guys excited for one of my builds, because I know I'm excited about this. So that's all we have for today. If you have any further questions, put them down in the comment section below. I'll do my best to answer every single one of those, but we're all done here. So you guys take care, stay safe, stay positive, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.